Having a dedicated notebook to plan my language study has literally been a game changer for me. Keeping such a notebook throughout my whole learning journey has greatly helped me. And perhaps without it, I wouldn't have been able to focus as much as I did on my Japanese studies, and I wouldn't be fluent in the language today. I have been using a single notebook for everything related to my language study since 2020, where I've been tracking my language study goals, my language study resources, my language progress, and even my scores at language proficiency exams. 皆さんこんにちは、アリです。Hi everyone, welcome or welcome back. If you're new here, my name is Ali and today we're talking about my 2023 language study planner. Now, today's video is mainly going to be the flip through of my 2023 language study journal. But first, let's do a comparison of all my planners from 2020 to 2023. This, I hope, will give you insights on how I refined my organization method over the years. And let's start with 2020 here. I will show you two spreads. The first spread was back at the beginning of the year in January and February 2020. And what you can see here is that I was writing down all of the resources I was using to study Japanese and seeing what I was covering per week. And so, for example, if we take this line, the Tobira line, Daisan Sho, Bunpo, and so this is a specific textbook that I used. I was covering the third chapter of that textbook that week and specifically the grammar points. And because this is highlighted in yellow, you can see that I actually did that during the week, whereas the things that are not highlighted are things I didn't get to do that particular week. I pretty much did the same thing here. And another thing to note is that I was also adding onto these lists anything I was using for immersion purposes. And so, for example, you have here Tenki no ko yomi hajimete. So start reading in a very broken Japanese. Start reading Tenki no ko, which is the novelization of an anime movie. I don't remember the name in English, but I will put it here. Now, if we move on to a bit later during the year, what has changed here? So first of all, I started categorizing the resources I was using per language skill. So here we have the category Gakushu for active studying, and so I was mainly covering the textbooks I was using at the time. Then we have listening kaiwa, so my oral comprehension skill and my oral expression skills. So you can see all of these dots, for example, are all the YouTube videos I watched during that particular week. I was very much focused on immersion at the time. I also had 2 conversation lessons on Cafe Talk. So that's how you should read this. And another thing I was doing was tracking the hours I spent studying per day. So for example, I can see that on this particular Saturday, I spent more than 6 hours studying Japanese. So it was either studying actively or simply immersing in the language. And so you can see that for that particular week, the total was 26 hours and 58 minutes of Japanese studying. And finally, when we move on to the end of the year here, so week 52, you would see that I was starting to track the type of studying or immersion I would do during the week on each particular day. So for example, here I would track the fact that I studied grammar, Japanese grammar with this green dot, and you can see that on this weekly spread here where the green dots are. So on the Wednesday and the Thursday, I studied grammar, so on and so forth for the other skills. Now, the thing that is interesting is to compare this particular spread with the spread at the beginning of my 2021 language study journal. So this is my 2021 language study planner. And so if we take the first spread, this one, you can see that there is a clear correlation, clear similarity between this spread with the little dots and the daily logging of all the studying I was doing, and this particular spread on which you can see that I also did this daily logging here, but I was also this time logging exactly what I was studying with. So for example, the listening dot, so the pink dot was listening comprehension, and you can see that I mostly watched YouTube videos here, but that I also watched Ryomaden, 2 episodes actually of Ryomaden, which is a Japanese drama. Another thing that I took from 2020, the end of 2020, and which I improved here was the tracking of the resources I was using. So I significantly reduced the number of resources I was using at one time. I was using only 3 resources per week. Otherwise, I would get overwhelmed. And you can see that I was tracking which sections I wanted to cover and which sections I actually did cover. Moving on to the last thing I tracked in my language study planner in 2021. Here we have a third section, which is the Matome section, which was basically a section for me to keep a memo, a log in Japanese, for me to just reflect on the week and to, of course, practice my written expression skills. All right, now let's compare this layout with the layout I used in my 2022 language study planner. So let's take any page, and you will see that I significantly modified the layout here. What did I get rid of? I got rid of the daily tracking of my studying because I didn't feel the need to do it anymore. Another section I got rid of was the memo part. It was very fun to do it over the span of 1 full year. I did it really until the end of 2021. So for 1 full year, every single week, I wrote a small paragraph in Japanese to reflect on my week, my study week. And, you know, after 1 year, it became a bit repetitive. I was starting to always use the same words, always use the same sentence structures, and it was just starting to get non-beneficial anymore. So I just stopped doing it. And so in 2022, what I kept was really this section only. So the tracking of my weekly study goals, as well as the tracking of what I would actually study during the week by ticking off or filling in the little boxes here. So this is a very simple layout. In 2022, I introduced 2 new languages, Chinese, and I also introduced Russian. And you can see I didn't separate really my Japanese goals from my Russian and Chinese goals. I just kept everything on the same space. All right, and lastly, we're going to compare the last of my weekly pages for 2022 with the first page of my 2023 planner, and you can see that nothing changed. I kept the exact same layout, and in fact I'm still using the same layout even now in 2024 because this was working very well for me in 2022, so I just kept the exact same layout for 2023. And you can now see exactly how I refined my method of tracking my language study over the course of these 3 years. So I hope this little comparison section was useful to you. If you have any more questions, let me know in the comments down below. Now let's move on to the actual flip through of my 2023 language study planner. Let's start at the actual beginning here. At the beginning we have a calendar sticker, the contents page, which I haven't filled out yet, but which I will fill out soon. The tracking of my resources for Japanese, for Chinese, and for Russian. None of this is filled out, and this is because pretty much right after creating those pages, I actually moved everything to Notion because it was much easier for me to track my resources. So I won't be filling out these pages. Actually, I will be using Notion from now on. If you guys want me to show you my resource tracker on Notion, please let me know and I will do a video about that. Then we have the page for my language study goals for the year. I have referred back to this page throughout the year, only a few times to be honest. So just like the resource tracker, I have moved everything to Notion because I tend to open Notion a lot more than looking back at these pages on my language study planner. And now we move on to the actual start of my language study planner. So you can see I have only a few pages before actually starting my weekly lists. And we start with obviously week 1. You can see that in week 1 I was studying with Toriaezu N1 Dokkai. This was a reading comprehension preparation textbook. I was also doing the Russian course on Duolingo. I was also doing the Chinese course on Duolingo. In week 2, I was starting the Yoku Wakaru textbook. I was still going through Duolingo for Chinese, and I was still going through the Russian course on Duolingo as well. Week 4, I was again making some good progress on my Yoku Wakaru textbook for Japanese, and I was struggling with my Duolingo for Chinese and struggling even more for my Russian course on Duolingo. On week 5, I was focusing mainly on Chinese. As you can see, I almost didn't do anything for my Japanese study goals and nothing for my Russian. In week 6, I basically made up for my week 5 fail. I was starting to really let go of Russian at this point. On week 7 of the year, I finished the Yoku Wakaru textbook. In fact, I realized that I probably finished the Toriaezu textbook. Yes, probably finished it here on week 1. So I finished the Yoku Wakaru textbook here. The Duolingo course, I was still doing a little bit, but then Russian, as you can see, I really stopped doing any Russian. Week 8, I didn't do much. I did the audit part of the Shinkansen Master, probably the reading comprehension Shinkansen Master. You can see that I was not doing a lot of studying at this point. I think I was actually traveling a little bit, and my family came to visit in March, and then in April I was a bit busy. So that's why my studies were not as intense. And by week 11, I actually started to study a lot more, and by week 12 I fully recovered, and as you can see, I finished all of my goals for that specific week. Here, and here actually. So Shinrigaku, Shinri. This is just the name of a particular book on psychology I read, and I was tracking the pages actually that I was reading. I really wanted to read as much as I could of this book in a short time, so that's why I started tracking it on my weekly study goals. Week 13, I started really tracking down everything I was reading on my psychology book. But then you can see that I was planning on doing a lot of my Shinkansen Master book, a lot more than I actually did, because you can see that on week 13, almost none of this is filled out. I really reduced these goals the week after that on week 14. So you can see a good example here on what kind of adjustment I would do to make sure I meet my goals, because seeing a week like this where almost nothing is ticked off is really demotivating for me. So I try to keep this to a minimum and to rectify it pretty much as soon as I can. So the following week I would really reduce the number of things I want to do. By this time you notice that I stopped tracking my Russian because I stopped studying Russian for a while. On week 16, 17 and 18, I remember that, yes, I felt, as you can see on this page, 8 weeks left before the JLPT N1. I started feeling a bit unprepared for the N1, and so I wanted to really focus back again on my Japanese as much as possible. I was still doing a bit of Chinese on the side, just for fun, really, but I was mainly focused on my Japanese. Still using the Shinkansen Master. Here for Chinese, it is still the Duolingo course. In May, I decided that I would not study any more Chinese except Duolingo, and that I would study at least 2 hours a day Japanese with Fridays off. This was when my intensive Japanese study before the JLPT N1 started from week 19. I only put down my Japanese study goals there. I stopped writing my Chinese study goals. I just did a little bit of Duolingo every day, but without a particular goal in mind, just to keep my daily streak on. For Japanese, I was almost done with using the Shinkansen Master. On week 20, I finished it here, but then I started using the prep books Power Doriru for Japanese for the exam. First one was the Power Doriru for grammar, and then I started using the Power Doriru for vocab here on week 21. The main thing to notice here, I think, is that I was using only 2 resources at the same time for Japanese. So for example, here, as soon as I finished the Shinkansen Master, I replaced it with a new resource, which was the Power Doriru for vocab. Onto the final stretch of preparations for the JLPT. You can see this reflected here by the fact that I started logging in the mock tests results I was doing. Every week I was doing at least 1 mock test at this time. And so I really wrote down every single mark I got for every section of these mock tests on week 23, week 24 here, week 25, week 25 again, 26. At the end, by week 26, I was doing 2 mock tests a week. Apart from the mock tests, I was still logging in the Japanese studying I was doing. At the time, I was focused mainly on my vocab because that was the thing I was lacking the most. And at the same time, I was also doing a lot of reading comprehension still, and I was still covering the Power Doriru here, as you can see. The exam was on the 2nd of July, and you can see that after that, I pretty much took the whole month off. The thing I want to say here is that, I kept logging in every single week at the start of the week, whether or not I would be on vacation that week or whether I wanted to study a bit. I didn't want to study, and that's fine. And so I didn't write any goals. And instead, I just wrote Yasumi. One of the biggest takeaways you can get from this video is that I made sure that over the years, I kept tracking anything I was doing for my language study every single week, whether or not I was doing any language studying. And if I wanted to take a break, I would just write that down. The point is that this particular logging was the habit. I would always come back to this notebook. This would be my anchor. And this kept me motivated to go on. In week 31, at the beginning of August, I wanted to study again. I wanted to restart my studying, and so this is exactly what I did, but I mostly focused on Japanese because I was still so focused on Japanese. From week 34, I started categorizing my weekly study goals per language. Nihongo, Zhongwen, Ruski. So I restarted my Russian also on week 35. I was doing pretty well. I think I covered a lot of ground over the span of these 4 weeks. And then on week 38, so we were at the end of September here, and week 39, I started reducing the amount of studying I was doing because I was preparing for my big trip that I took around Japan during the whole month of October. And so during the whole month of October, I didn't do any studying, and I tracked it before I went on my trip. I took an amazing break from studying, and so when I came back, I was ready for some studying after I put my life in order, really, during week 44, which is why I didn't do any studying, but I was more motivated than ever because I really wanted to upgrade my Japanese. So I focused on Japanese for the month of November. Here is my essay collection book. I was tracking the number of essays I would read each week. Here is my Matrix book. I was tracking the chapters I wanted to read every week. And then here is my vocab book for Japanese natives. And then here we're coming onto the end of the year. We're almost done. So week 48, I was still doing the essay reading. I was still doing the vocab. I stopped reading the Matrix book. And also the last thing I was starting to do here was to track down the listening immersion I was doing, specific videos on business topics, on finance related themes, or anything that was a bit more professional, specifically to upgrade my vocab. Then I would track these down here. So my goal, for example, for the week 48 was to watch 3 of these videos. On week 50, 2 weeks before the end of the year, I started the Shinkansen Master for N1 Kanji. So I did the structure check or audit phase. And then at the end of the year, here is what I studied for week 51 and week 52. I tracked down the books I read during that last week of the year. And then here I have the top of the best resources I used for each language during the year. And that is pretty much it. So you can see here that I have used almost half of this notebook for 2023. And I'm actually continuing this notebook for the year 2024. And here are my first 2 weekly study goals lists for 2024. Alright, so that's it. A quick note to tell you that the entirety of this particular notebook is actually in my first video of this channel. I did a whole flip through of this. So if you're interested, please refer to that video. And I haven't actually done a flip through of both my 2021 language study planner and my 2022 language study planner. And now that we are in 2024, I felt like this was a bit obsolete now, that it was a bit irrelevant. But, you know, if you're still interested, please let me know in the comment section. I will do a flip through of both these planners. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you have any questions, by all means, please leave them down below. And if you need personalized advice from me, you can always come and see me for a private one-on-one online coaching session. Alright, signing off for today, and I will see you in my next video. Bye bye! Mata ne!